fucking gas.
What's going on, everybody? My name's Danny Ferrari.
My name's Parker Immense.
And we are Excellent Sound, and we are back with a very special video for you guys today. And we know it's been a little bit. You know, we've had a lot of stuff going on. We had EDC. We're kind of getting back into the sort of the swing of things, so expect a lot more content from us coming up very soon, just like this. First things first, we are going to go ahead and get into this video. We're going to talk about 5 tips to be a better sound designer. Now, this could be a series, I feel like, because it could go so deep. Right now, we're going to specifically focus on the virtual instrument or synthesis sort of sound design.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of requests for this kind of video, and we're going to be showing a lot of secrets that we use, secrets and strategies that you guys have been asking about over and over and over again, and we just haven't gotten around to making a video about it. You know what I'm saying?
Super lazy.
We're indebted to you guys,
yes,
you know, but we're paying our debts right now.
Pay our debts, but before we do that, we want to let you guys know we're going to be using some of our presets from our packs, Drops Only Volume 1 and Drops Only Volume 2. It's essentially, it's a pack that helps you create drops, right? It's a pack with drop-ready sounds, no chords, no piece of fucking leads. No, there's leads. No piece of fucking plucks.
No pads.
No god pads.
Those pads.
Basses, leads. Get out of it, growls and okay?
In your face.
It literally drop ready presets so that it can help you. And they have sequences in them so they can give you rhythm ideas.
And none of this 30 preset bullshit. There's 150 in both packs. So 300 presets for $50.
That's what we're doing right now.
That's fucking wild.
Drops Only 1 and 2 is on sale right now for $50. You're going to get 300 presets for $50. And they're our best presets. So, yes, go to the website. Link is in the description. Anything else, bro, before we get in?
That's it, dude. Let's jump right in.
Like, subscribe, and make sure you guys comment down your tips for being a better sound designer. Okay, let's go.
Just the tips.
Just the tips, baby. Let's hit it, baby. Just the tips.
Perhaps play a little game called Just the Tip. Just for a second.
All right. Tip number 1 for being a better sound designer. I feel like this one is the perfect first step tip, okay? Learn the basic shapes, okay? Look, it's kind of fucking boring. I know nobody wants to fucking sit here and like memorize what this shit sounds like, but I promise you, it's really, really easy. And if you do it, it's gonna help you in developing your own sound. I promise you. So, what are the basic shapes? So, if you open up Serum or any sort of wavetable synthesis, most of them are gonna have a basic shapes category, right? They're gonna have a sine wave, they're going to have a saw wave, they're going to have a triangle wave, a square wave, and if you're lucky, a pulse wave, and then another pulse wave, and then whatever the fuck this thing is called. I don't know. Who knows? That thing's cool, though. Yeah. Sounds like a square saw. Okay, so basic shapes. And what do I mean by learning the basic shapes is all I mean is literally just memorize what they sound like. If I hit a sine wave, tiny little note, right? Let's go up higher octave. And what you want to do is you want to pick out a word or picture something in your mind that it reminds you of. That's what really helped me. So when I think sine wave, I think of like an 808 or like a really low sub, right? Or a bell, like a bell. Like if you were to make a bell, you would use a sine wave, right? It's kind of it's kind of duty. I don't know if that makes any sense. Here it is on the spectrum of Fat Filter Pro Q3. A sine wave is just one harmonic frequency, right? You can add harmonic frequencies, obviously, into Serum, but your goal should be, if I was to hit this note and your eyes were closed, you should be able to say, that's a sine wave, okay? Sine waves, great for subs, great for definitely for basses, definitely used for FM, which we'll get into, and definitely great for making organic sounds, right? Everything sort of starts from a sine wave. A sine wave is like the fundamental sound. It's the fundamental frequency.
It is.
Right? Okay, sine waves, done. Next, okay, we have triangles, okay? Just kidding, sawtooth waves. Sawtooth waves are a little bit different, right? If I hit a note, look at all this extra harmonic frequency we have. So if you guys don't know how to read this, you really should pay attention. This is the low end all the way to the low mids, to the high end, right? So any high stuff I hear, if I boost that, that's like boosting the treble in your car stereo. If I boost this over here, it's the bass. Okay, so a saw wave sounds like a buzz. It literally makes me think of an electric razor.
Yeah.
Right? I think I've sampled an electric razor, and it is a saw wave. Like, it's a buzz. Like, think of like a buzz saw. Saw wave's pretty much the most recognizable, I think, for people.
I agree with that.
And it has a lot of high-end upper harmonics, and actually can do pretty well as far as creating, you know, screeches, leads, really pretty plucks, chords, all that type of stuff. Saw waves, I love them, okay? You can do a ton of stuff with them. Next, we have the triangle wave. Now, triangle wave, I think of like if a sine wave came into a restaurant and there was a saw wave, and the saw wave's like, hey, sine wave, can I buy you a drink? And the sine wave's like, yeah, sure. Why don't you take me home? The saw wave's like, yeah, you know what? Fuck the drink. Let's go home. And then bam, they start making love for hours on hours, right? And you're just sitting there watching. Don't laugh. This is serious because you need to learn, okay? Sine wave and saw wave, and they're just going at it, right? And they're just making love all night long. Hot, sweaty love, right? Just bam. And then Parker walks in the door. They're like, no, Parker. And
That's my sine wave.
And the saw wave says, no. Let the boy watch. Let him watch. He needs to learn.
Let the boy watch. He needs to learn.
That's you. You need to watch. You need to learn. Because when you put a saw wave and a sine wave together, you get kind of like a triangle wave. It sounds like this. Doesn't that sound like, a nice little mix of the sine wave? And if you look at the harmonic frequency, it has a little bit of the saw characteristics and a little bit of the low end. Triangles are really good FM wavetables. I really like to use them along with sine waves. They're also very good for basses. So if you don't want to add harmonics to a sine wave, a triangle can give you a really nice bass. A lot of tear out and rhythm basses. I like to use a lot of triangle waves for those. So yeah.
And it helps with the saturation. You don't have to oversaturate and then cut the highs. You could still cut the highs, and there's going to be a lot of those low end information.
It's a saturated sine. And then we also have the square wave. When I think of square wave, right? Little hollow sounding, but when you go to the higher octave,
Game Boy,
right? That's
there
pretty easy. One more is a pulse wave. So essentially a pulse wave is a pinch. Like whenever anything's pulsed with, it sounds like pinchy. It sounds like nasally. So it's like been up all night doing cocaine, right? And then it's just made love to a square wave. A square wave and a saw wave made love together all night long.
Pinched.
All on cocaine.
Pinched. Clogged nose.
A pinched nose, saw wave, square wave, hardcore love all night long. They're making this pulse wave right here, okay? And it's been up all night on cocaine. Sounds like this. You hear it's like more nasally. Very, very, very similar to a square wave, but also has a little bit more saw high-end texture, right? Those are pretty much the basic shapes. Familiarize yourself with these shapes and you will be a better sound designer. And when you're trying to remake sounds or you're trying to choose different sounds, you have an idea of where to start. These are the fundamentals. You don't need to know how every single wavetable sounds, right? I only know how a few of them sound, to be honest with you. I really only know the basic shapes. And if you notice, a lot of our remakes start from the basic shapes because that's where everything starts, okay? Those are your RGB, whatever the fuck it is. Those are your primary colors, right? My girlfriend's gonna be mad at me. She knows all this shit. What are the primary colors? Who the fuck knows? Look it up on Google. Primary colors, that's the basic shapes,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Basically, those colors can make any other color in the world.
Yeah.
I think that's what it means. Something with math.
Yeah, and when you're listening to music, test yourself. You know what I'm saying? Oh,
Yeah.
Is this a sine wave? Is this a P-dub?
Yeah.
You
A
know, what
P-dub?
is this?
Is
Is
this
this a square wave?
Is this a square
When
wave?
you're playing Game Boy, it's all square waves.
All square waves.
You know, but test yourself
Yeah.
and remember the song, come back, open up basic shapes, and
Yeah.
test it out. See if you were right.
Play a song, and if you think it sounds like a square wave, ask yourself, has this square wave been up all night doing cocaine? Chances are yes. Then that means it's a pulse width.
Yeah.
Okay. There's this wavetable. I'm not sure if it's a sine, or saw. Well, it's probably a mix of both. Does it sound like it's been a love child of two different beautiful shapes?
This is an excellent tutorial.
That's a triangle. All right, step 2, we are talking about filters, right? So we talked about learning the basic shapes. The next step is to learn the basic filters, right? What do I mean by that, right? So if you open up Serum or any other synthesizer, will have basic filters. Basic filters include a low pass filter, which looks like this, okay? And they have different shapes as far as how far they go down, but pretty much a low 12 to 24 is pretty much what you're gonna get.
Different shelves.
Different shelves of how much is being cut out of the high end, right? And you remember, so when you look at this is essentially an EQ. That's all a filter is. It's an EQ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything blue is getting cut out. So when I hit just a saw wave, right? Right? And then if I have a low pass filter and I close the low pass filter, which means I'm essentially EQing all the high end out because all this is getting cut, you're going to hear it start to sound darker. All the high end's going to go away. Okay, that is a low filter. I'm not going to go through each one of these filters, but there's low, right? And there's high, and there's bandpass highs, right? Typically used for growls and stuff like that. Really cool to get sort of vocally sounds with high passes, usually like a high 12 or 18. You can hear the vocalness in it, right? With a lot of resonance, even if with no resonance. Okay, it's really important that you familiarize yourself with these basic filters as well, okay? Band passes also can sound like they've been up all night doing cocaine. right?
That's a nasal boy right there.
Very nasal, right? There's different shelves too. These sound really, really cool when you mess with the cutoffs. You want to do like a cool wub or something, these little band passes are pretty sick. Right? You can get kind of vocally with them, but it doesn't have that high end like a high pass, okay? Those are like sort of the basic filters. There is more too. There's like notches and stuff like that. All they are EQs, but familiarize yourself with it. And then on top of that, right, you want to start familiarizing yourself with some of the more advanced wavetables, right? You have combs, right? All comb is, let me go ahead and put up the resonance, right? It's a bunch of little EQ points pulled up and pulled out and pulled up and pulled out, and it gives you sort of a metallic sound. And you can hear the pitch changing a lot because of those resonance peaks. Those are swiping through notes. So even though I'm hitting like just a note and I move this cutoff, you should be able to hear, if you hear like a metallic sound, you should be able to be like, oh, that's either a comb filter or a flange filter. Flanges are very similar to comb. Look, they look very similar. A little bit more screechy, I guess.
Yeah.
The resonance peak is really how you get more of that screechness. But because of all those resonance peaks, that's what makes it sound metallic. So just when you hear a metallic sound, you got to be like, okay, or I want to make a metallic sound. You're most likely going to use a comb filter or a flange filter. And then, of course, a reverb filter, too, at least in Serum. Here it is. I'm going to go ahead and turn this down, turn all that down. I'm just going to play a note. It sounds like it's like in a metal box or something to me.
Yeah.
And as I move the cutoff, watch this. It's almost screechy in a way. It's kind of like hairy, but it's metallic. I don't know. This is like how I think of it. Familiarize yourself with those basic filters and some of the advanced filters, and that's going to help you go a long, long way.
Yeah, these are your tools, you guys. You have to learn how to use the tools to get the result that you want. If you're building a house or like building some wood sculpture, you got to learn how to use a drill. You got to know how to turn the drill on,
right,
and how to spin one way, spin the other way.
Exactly.
Put the screw in and screw it in.
Just fucking.
If you don't know how to use a drill, you're not going to be able to screw it in.
Yeah, you got to know how to do. You got to know the basics before you can,
Yeah, learn the tools.
All right, let's get into the next step. Step number 3, okay? Modulations, envelopes, LFOs, and macros, okay? What are those? You guys should know what they are. But you want to familiarize yourself with what each of them do. So, for instance, if I have a saw wave, right, and I have my main envelope right here, this is essentially, I look at this as like time. So if I was to move the attack, right, which is essentially is how, thank you.
You're welcome.
If I was to move the attack, that means how fast does the sound come in? So if I was to slow it down, right, and I hit a note, you're going to hear it start to fade in. And then the sustain is how long that note is going to hold for, okay? Decay is how long that note is going to drop off, right? So the cool thing about Serum is that it has a visualizer that really helps you, right? So if you watch the light, this is the sound. I'm going to go ahead and hit a note. And then I have the release right there. The reason why you can kind of use these really, really cool is you can get cool sort of shapes like this. So let's say I want to make like a cool, like a brass sort of type of sound, right? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a really slow attack, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of release. I'm going to mess with the decay. I want to do like more of a shape like this, almost, sort of kind of like a really thin sort of like V upside down, right? And then if I use like a low pass filter, by itself, it's kind of like, oh, whatever, right? I got some unison. If I go ahead and I put this on a cutoff, and that's really good too, like in tech house, like that type of sound, you know what I mean? And the reason why it's got that whop is because of the actual progression of this going up here. This is like essentially your hand, right? So like imagine your hand is turning this knob right here, right? If I was to hold this up longer, you see how I'm holding the note still. But if I let go, then it shuts, and it shuts in that fashion. If I have a ton of release, let's do that again. Let go. See how it's shutting itself? It's really important to understand how the envelopes and LFOs work. LFOs work the same way as envelopes, okay? LFOs are really, really great for creating patterns and different things. An LFO is a little bit more powerful than an envelope in the sense that instead of doing this, right, I'm gonna go ahead and remove all this. I only have a couple knobs that I can kind of adjust. Serum makes it really great so you can just do it with the mouse like so and get a little bit different shapes. But with LFO, you kind of have the same thing, but you have so much more control. So for instance, I wanna get that same sort of brassy sound. I can go ahead and set up an LFO just like this. Very similar. Let's go ahead and do like the upside down V thing. And I'm going to go ahead and put that on the cutoff as well. Right? And it's really, really cool. But also like understanding that like where the points are. This is attack now. This is the beginning of the sound. This is the end of the sound. Watch how slow it opens up this. And as soon as it gets up to here, it's going to open up faster, right? That sort of shape right there is almost like a natural, like, you know, you're DJing or whatever, and you do the, you know, like a filter twist. It's kind of like a natural shape. That's what I think of. I think of my hand moving that knob. I think of me putting my finger and just like moving it around, right?
Yeah, it's more detailed of a shape.
Right. But another reason why the LFOs are really great is because you can do something called trigger. You can essentially loop, right? So I can just have this LFO just go on instantly. Syncs with my, you know, with my tempo, and then I can do different things. I can have it speed up, right? You can't do that with an envelope, right? With an envelope, it's a one shot, right? And then lastly, you have a macro. Now remember I was talking about doing this stuff with your hands and your fingers, right? Whatever you can do with your fingers and your hands, right? What you can do is, let's say I have a really cool sound and I don't want to mess it up, right? Okay, I got this sound, right? And I'm like, oh, I like this little respace sound. But you know what? I want to try to see what it sounds like with these filter open up. But I have it in the perfect spot, so I don't want to mess it up. You can apply a macro. Essentially, a macro is just another free knob. So the macro will move the knob for you, but you can also return it back to its original position, which is really nice. Now, macros are really powerful too because you can use them in really interesting ways. So, for instance, let's say I have sort of like a wub. Let's pull up a wub from Drops Only Volume 2. And I can get sort of like an idea and a rhythm. So with a macro, I can go ahead and be like, all right, well, I want this thing. I want to do that little rhythm I did. So what I could do is I could set up an LFO, right? LFO is going to go ahead and adjust this over time and set it to a bar, right? So I'm going to want to go bam, 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 bam. All you'd have to do is put on a macro knob onto the actual rate, right? And the way I like to do it is I like to do this. So this would be called the LFO rate, okay? And then I'll turn it all the way up because you'll notice that when you add a macro, it's gonna go to the full max. So I'm gonna turn it all the way up. Sounds like shit, right? So what I do is I go to the farthest point that I'll know that I'll want, which is probably like, 30 seconds, or 32 seconds. How do you say that?
30-second notes.
30-second notes. So I'm just gonna listen. I'm just gonna hold the note. I'm gonna start pulling it out. That's probably the most I'm going to want it, like that crazy. So now I have an LFO rate. So now I can go like... And then I can go in and start drawing in sort of automation and automating that specific macro. But you can also apply that macro to a ton of different parameters. You don't just have to do LFO rates, right? You can do it on a ton of different stuff. Macros are super powerful. And if you open up any of our presets, you'll see that we put macros on everything. And the reason why we do that is so that you can change the sound and sort of make it your own and kind of also learn what's happening. So let's say I wanted to do like a little pattern. I'd go like this. I'd drag out this note. Nothing's happening because I haven't made an automation lane. So let's go ahead and make an automation lane. So I'm going to go in automation mode. And then I have right here my LFO rate, right? If I touch this knob, bam, that comes up. So I want it to go wow, 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 wow. Okay, I can also use the grid. Wow, 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 wow. And that's essentially how you can get sort of ideas. That's how a lot of like the early pioneers of like dubstep were doing a lot of stuff, was using macros. Very powerful tool. So again, familiarize yourself with envelopes, LFOs, and macros. Super important to be able to be a better sound designer. Step number 4, how to be a better sound designer. Learn how to reverse engineer presets. So we got this preset pulled up, one of our favorite ones. Super Skrillexy sounding. Okay, how do I understand what the fuck is happening right here? The first thing I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to move the macros around. Okay, so I see that that's controlling how fast it goes. This says octave B. What does that do? Okay, that must be for this octave, how high of a note it is. So right now it's turned down. Okay, so that gets a little bit more screechy, right? Okay, interesting, right? Lower. Who knows what that means? Oh, cool. So that's sort of like a little bit more of like a lower vocally sound, okay? So if there's macros, first understand that. The next thing you want to do is you want to start turning things on and off. So start with everything sort of off, right? Don't turn off the LFOs, but just turn off all the processing. How does it sound? It sounds like tubular. There's like a tubey sound, right? I want to know what that tubey sound is so that I can use that in the future. We call it a linchpin. What is the linchpin of a sound, right? Essentially, it's like, what is the main part of the sound? All this stuff is doing, it's just accentuating it more. It still sounds the same. It's just not as loud and as powerful when I have all these off, right? So that means that the wow, wow, that tubular sound is coming from something in here, right? So to find that out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start turning off other things. I'm going to turn off this filter. Okay, I'm kind of losing the womp, womp, womp sound, right? That sound that I'm like, how do you make that tubular womp sound? I know now that it's a high-pass 12 filter. Now, what's happening to that high-pass 12 filter? Okay, so there's an LFO that's on that cutoff, right? Okay, so what happens if I move this? Oh, it changes the tone a little bit. Okay, all right, well, what happens if I turn this off? It has that texture of like the metallic sound, but it doesn't have the whoomp, right? The whoomp is coming from this LFO shape. So what I'll do too is I'll remember this LFO shape. So I know that different shapes are going to change that. So it's the same thing with reverse engineering. So let's go ahead and put this back on. What happens if I move this? Oh, I got a different sort of tonality to it. Okay, that's like a lot sharper, right? What happens if I move this thing down? Right, it's really quick, right? So essentially go through and start turning things on and off. Try not to mess it up too much so that you can understand what's happening. So far, we figured out that the high pass filter is in with this resonance peak and this LFO is making that sort of womp sound. Womp, womp, right? And I want to know that because I want to be able to recreate my own sounds, right? Okay, now I know it's coming from the high pass. So let's go ahead and single that out. We don't want to use that anymore. So look, we have the level that's being controlled by this shape right here. So that seems to be the main shape of the sound. When you get into sound design and with LFOs, you'll notice that a lot of times there's one LFO that's essentially doing most of the work. I see that there's this FM knob, right? Okay. The FM knob is giving it an interesting characteristic. It looks like this LFO is also on there. So I'm going to go ahead and bypass that. What does this do? Oh, wow, that really loses the sound, right? If I turn it up, does it happen? Okay, it's kind of back, right? Okay, cool. So I know that that is a big part of the sound. So I would say that this sound is mostly made with FM, basic shapes, and a high-pass filter, right? Whenever I see an LFO like this in a preset, I already know what it's doing. 9 times out of 10, it's controlling a pitch of somehow, which in this case, it is. So the pitch of oscillator B is essentially being pitched up very high and then coming down very quickly. If I bypass B coarse pitch, it kind of loses that laseriness of it. Just a little bit. It's also controlling the sync knob right here. So I like to think of you have your main sort of LFO that's like essentially the workhorse. And then you have another LFO. And this LFO is usually like, I like to call like the fun LFO, right? It's kind of like weird. You can try different things. I can try to like... I'm putting it on things like pitch. I'm putting it on things like maybe an FM or sync, right? And then usually you have one more LFO I like to think of for controlling just like the master pitch. Find a sound that you really, really like and then be like, okay, let's figure out how this sound is made. And just like, all you have to do is turn it off. It's the easiest thing to learn in the world. And that brings us to our last step, okay? Step number 5, the one we've all been waiting for.
Should we tell them?
Some of them are going to piss their pants and be like, fuck, man, I don't know how to do that. And
I don't know if we should tell them, dude.
I'm here. Papa's here.
Should we tell them?
Daddy, you can handle it.
Let's tell them.
Daddy will tell you.
Let's tell them.
Listen. These two daddies right here, these two sound daddies, we're going to hold your hand right through it. So don't get scared, okay? Because this step is very important.
We're showing you guys how to remake.
These are 2 sound daddies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They're your sound daddies, and they love you. Okay? The last one is to remake sounds. Everyone's going to be like, well, I don't know how to remake anything, dude.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do, right? I don't know all this stuff yet. I don't have shit memorized like you do.
Okay.
Listen. Dude, listen. When Excellent Sound started, okay, when we started doing our first videos, I had an understanding of sound design. Parker had an understanding of sound design. Were we good sound designers? Absolutely not, right? Not at all, honestly. Like, I could make a couple growls and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I knew was that I had enough of an ear to recognize when something sounds similar. Anybody can recognize similarity, unless you're deaf, okay? That's, shout out, sorry, deaf people.
Yep.
To cut that out. You were to hear my voice, and you were to hear Parker's voice, you would say those 2 voices sound different. You're using that same sort of primal instinct that you have in your body to do the same thing with recreating sounds. So when we started recreating sounds, we were not starting from scratch. Do we start them from scratch now? Yes, because we're able to get them a lot more tighter.
Yeah.
But how we started learning how to recreate sounds, right, to be able to make better sounds for ourselves, because that's the whole point, is that we started finding similar sounding sounds and then adjusting them, okay? I have an example for you right here. So we have this really cool, I guess this is like some new artist, smaller guy. Check him out. He's got a really sick
Variet.
V-Riot's based one shot. This guy right here. Pretty cool sound, right? Well, I went in and I went through our presets, okay? And what I found was this sound. That sounds kind of similar. Now watch. And you're like, that doesn't really sound that similar. And it's like, well, it does. There's like a, ay, right? There's like a, I like to call it a bark. This is a bark sound. It's like very gettery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
First thing I'm going to do is be like, okay, well, it has a little bit of the texture and tonality, so let's go ahead and slow down the rate. Okay, we're getting closer. First off, our octave is totally fucked. What song is that?
Oh, yeah.
So a really good nudge, especially when it comes to remaking or referencing or anything like that, is using something really powerful like FabFilter Pro Q3. Okay, FabFilter Pro Q3 has this really, really cool feature that what you can do is you can use their analyzer, okay? Put a FabFilter Pro Q3 on your reference track, and then on the track, let's say, for instance, this track, we're trying to recreate this sound. I have already started it with a preset that sounds like this, okay? I can open up my FabFilter Pro Q3, I can go to the analyzer, and I can say, oh, here it is. Pro Q3 reference, that's my reference track. Now I can see both of these analyzations. Huge, powerful tip when it comes to remaking sounds or even referencing your mix. Definitely recommend doing it, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is, I think it already sounds like it. I slowed down the LFO, okay? But it sounds like his goes, wow, wow, right? So I'm gonna make this a little longer. Right? And now I'm also going to noticing that the tuning's a little bit different, even though I'm hitting the same note. I have this +7 on the semitone right here, so I think that's probably affecting it. So I'm going to turn that down to 0. Okay, we're getting closer. The sync knob, this is definitely controlling pitch. I'm gonna go ahead and take this. If I turn this off, it's adding a lot of extra detail I don't think we need. So I think I'm just gonna use like a basic shape, and I'm gonna turn off that. And then start messing with the LFO. This is from Drops Only too, by the way. There's a little bit of pitch bend on oscillator 4. And then you can start matching the pitch as well, right? And then I can start messing through these. That's getting closer.
Yep.
I'm not going to fully remake the sound, but essentially you can see you're starting to get somewhere similar and close. And then what happens is you start learning what's happening in the sound because you're essentially reverse engineering and you're remaking at the same time, right? You're going through and you're finding out that, hey, the oscillator, what's making it sound sort of like wow sort of sound is probably this high pass filter and the FM. If I turn this off, I mean, that's everything.
Yeah.
The FM is a big part of it, right? So if that's the linchpin in the sound, and this is controlling that, then I know that, hey, okay, next time I use FM, I'm going to do the same thing if I want that sort of zomboid guttery sound. Okay, so it's a basic shape, a sine wave, a saw wave, octave. This makes a big difference too. This makes a huge difference. That is like the literal like gutter, like
yeah, dude.
That howl, you know what I'm saying? So that's a big thing that can really, really help you. So find a similar sounding sound in a preset, get as close as you can, and then start changing the knobs and trying to get it closer.
Mm-hmm.
These 5 tips, I promise you guys, will help you at the end of the day with being a better sound designer, okay? Hopefully you guys learned a lot from this video. I know we have learned a lot from these tips, and it's helped us get to a certain place to where we feel confident in making our own sounds, right? It's not about copying people's sounds. It's about learning them and studying them and then learning how to also do them and make them better and make them different, right?
Also, share your guys' sound design suggestions and tools that helped you guys out when you guys were learning how to sound design. Throw that in the comments so everybody can see it and read it. We're going to talk to you guys. We'd love to hear how you guys started.
Yeah, definitely. And check out, don't forget, Drops Only 1 and 2 is on sale right now for $50. There's 300 presets for $50.
Huge.
And you can go ahead and start deconstructing those presets. Those are good presets to deconstruct because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And you can kind of start getting an understanding, and they're also very powerful presets. You know, they're not just like saw waves and all that bullshit. So.
Pads. Fucking
Who does a pad?
chords. Fuck those chords.
We make pads, but
Yeah,
not
we
in
do.
this. Not in Drops Only, okay? If you guys like the video and you want to see like a part 2 or another type of this series to continue on, please let us know down in the comments below. Like the video, and if you could subscribe, it helps out the channel, obviously. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one, bro. Do you got anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks for watching.
Peace.
Phone's the fucking gas.